Good morning, everyone. My name is Siti Farah Nazurah binti Siron. I am a member of the National Education Association of Malaysia. I live in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone to receive everything that has been shared with an open heart for a better generation. This event is being organized by Institute Pendidikan Guru, Campus Bahasa Antarabangsa, and run by the National Education Association of Malaysia. So, I assume that some of the people in the audience tonight might not be aware of the changes and the issues in our education due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, our issue is on how COVID-19 has impacted students' learning experience. Okay. First of all, I would like to introduce our first panel for today. Um, Professor Dhia Melati. She is our Malaysian Minister of Education. She was a student of IPG, Institute Pendidikan Guru Campus Bahasa Antarabangsa herself, and she has spent 23 years in the education field before becoming an inspiring Minister of Education. All right, so how are you doing, Professor Dia?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to our next panel, which is Haja Nur Nabilah, an officer from the Curriculum Development Division unit in the Ministry of Education. So, as someone who sees from many perspectives, I'm sure Haja will have all the answers for today's issues. Am I right? How are you today, Haja
I'm trying
Nabila?
my best. I'm good and I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you for inviting.
All right. So, as we all know, COVID-19 has greatly wounded a lot of students through school closures due to COVID-19 have brought significant disruptions to education across the world. At the peak of the pandemic, 45 countries in the Europe and Central Asia region closed their schools, which is affecting 185 million students. So given the abruptness of the situation, teachers and administrations were unprepared for this transition. Hence, throughout the 3 years of the pandemic, the world faced plenty of changes in their children's education, particularly in Malaysia. There are limitations in the numbers of pupils per class, restrictions in teaching and learning sessions due to the SOPs given by the Ministry of Health, and also prolonged school closure due to the rise of COVID-19 cases in particular states or areas. Thus, what is the strategy of the Ministry of Education to ensure our education system thrive despite the challenges? So, let's listen to what our Minister of Education has to say. Right, the floor is yours, Professor.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. I am Professor Dhia Melati, the Minister of Education in Malaysia. With COVID-19 virus infections still rising, governments throughout the world are still scrambling to adapt and adopt conditions leading to a new normal in their countries. The education sector is one that has been most impacted by the pandemic. What we did to ensure our education system in Malaysia is ongoing despite the challenges is by having remote and hybrid learning approaches for the students during the pandemic.
Yes, I'm very well aware of that since my daughter is uh, coping and facing the same things also. Mhm.
Yes, I'm sure as a parent we are all aware of that. So
That's true.
So during the early stage of the pandemic, the Minister of Education announced that classes will be carried out online based on the suitability and convenience of teachers and students to avoid interactions and exposure of students to COVID-19. Okay, now let me explain the meaning The meaning of the approaches. Okay, so remote learning is a type of virtual learning where the teachers and the learners are separated and cannot meet in the traditional classroom. Okay, the next one, hybrid classroom. Hybrid classroom approach is a learning environment that consists of a mix of students whereby half of them will be present physically and another half will be joining the lesson virtually. Okay. This approach aims to reduce the number of students in the classroom by separating them into physical and virtual. Okay, so these approaches were taken to ensure that no learners were left behind.
All right, okay. So seemingly, it is confirmed that one of the first and major strategies that the school opted for is to conduct hybrid, or also known as remote learning. So I'm sure that during the early stage of the pandemic, which is at the end of the year 2020 and early 2021, um, articles in news outlets such as the Star and New Straits Times are reporting, discussing, and even debating the strategies stated by Professor Dhia. So coming back to the topic of hybrid learning, Haja Nabilah, as someone who is in charge of curriculum development, is there any adaptation made in this curriculum in order to support the hybrid learning?
Thank you, Ms. Farah. This question is often asked by both parents and teachers and even the students itself. So to answer your question, the syllabus and contents of teaching during pandemic is actually remain the same as during the pre-pandemic. Meaning to say, the students are still following the existing curriculum. For instance, we still use the CEFR for ESL primary learners. In fact, we just introduced the CEFR to the year 6 pupils during the pandemic. This actually shows that our curriculum is still ongoing despite the pandemic. The adjustment, as your question asks, is about the adjustment. The adjustment is more on the process of delivering the syllabus and the content. For hybrid and remote learning, teachers mostly use Google Meet or Zoom as the platform. There are also platforms to help teachers in creating worksheet. For example, we have live worksheet or word wall, and there are many more. Another adjustment is the timetable. The timetable is also adjusted to assist both students and parents. As we all are informed, remote and hybrid learning requires cooperation from the parents. And due to the distance, teachers are very limited in ensuring pupils' presence and participation during the lesson. So we do need help from the parents. And the timetable is adjusted to accommodate the parents' timing and also to make the lesson less burdening to all parties involved, whether it is the teachers, the parents, and the students itself. Too long of online learning and being in front of the device can cause fatigueness and also demotivation in learning. We certainly do not want any drawbacks influencing the effectiveness of teaching and learning.
Okay, so all right. As far as I know, hybrid or remote learning needs the internet. Okay, so which automatically involves financially and geographically. So for this reason, those people from rural areas and from low income families will surely have difficulties in conducting this strategy because they need a device and a strong connection to the internet. Right. So, as far as I know, there was an article that depicts this issue. Uh,
Uh,
it was an article from Star, right, on 16 June 2020. It says there. Uh, an 18 years old girl named Viviana climbed up a tree just to get a better internet connection. So therefore, how do you, Professor Melati, as the Minister of Education, solve this particular issue that the pupils face in such a condition?
Okay, let's see. PDPR is seen as a challenge not only for parents but also for teachers and students, especially those with limited access to computer devices and the internet. Many parents are forced to buy new devices for their children to ensure they can participate in digital classes, but the bottom 40% of the low income household are at risk of being left behind if they do not have the facility or cannot afford to buy one. So, to answer your question, a total of 150 million was provided for lower income families with laptops, tablets, and data connectivity during online learning. Other than that, the government introduced Classrooma, a daily television show that is available on a free-to-view television channel. In addition, the Malaysian government also took some initiative to provide 1 gig of free internet through selected telco companies throughout the MCO. Okay, so it is aimed at helping students from lower income families adapt to the new norm of online lesson, e-learning, and outside classroom teaching. Not only that, it is also to bridge the learning gap between those who can afford digital devices and those who cannot. Okay, so everyone deserves to have access to education.
All right, so I wholly agree with your last statement. I think, Professor Diaz. And also, there is a proactive approach indeed by the government by funding those who need it. Therefore, we can see that the Ministry of Education is committed to providing education to every people in Malaysia, regardless of race, social class, or religion. Well, what I conclude from what just now is stated by Professor Dhia, remote learning is a type of visual learning where teachers and learners are separated, right? The
Yeah.
hybrid classroom approach aims to reduce the number of students in the classroom by separating them into physical and virtual. And according to Haja Nabilah, the syllabus and contents of teaching during pandemic actually remain the same as during the pre-pandemic. So for hybrid and remote learning, teachers mostly use Google Meet or Zoom as the platform. Um, Actually, there are many other platforms, but those two is the main, right? And there are also platforms to help teachers to create and give worksheets such as Live Worksheet, Woodwall, Google Classroom, and others. All right, so Haja Nabila, it is said that the Ministry of Education has promised to ensure learning is still progressing even during the pandemic. So, according to your expertise, what is um, other approach than hybrid learning that has been done in our education system? Is there any effort on the teacher's part?
Absolutely. Uh, Teachers are actually the frontliners. They are the doers of the education system. They make sure that education is ongoing as planned in the curriculum. I see teachers, even the older teachers, are willing to learn and practice using the internet. They started to familiarize themselves using the Google Classroom and emails, for example. They begin to incorporate multiple sources into the lessons, such as by integrating the videos from YouTube or even TikTok. And also there are slide shares created using Canva and of course Microsoft PowerPoint. Some teachers even would go to the extent of investing their own money to buy extra equipment for teaching online. For example, they subscribe to high speed data or bought a high quality camera. Some even bought iPad, ring light, and even a new laptop just to accommodate the teaching process. Because as we all know, teaching online requires efficiency and coherence while teaching. So these teachers are willing to invest time in preparing themselves with necessary skills and also invest money in equipping themselves with adequate tools which will help them in ensuring a smooth process of teaching and learning. So to answer your question, absolutely, the teachers has been contributing to ensure education is still progressing during the pandemic.
Wow, I am impressed with the efforts that have been done by our educators. So, now we know that teachers are also developing themselves to be better educators. All right, so a question for you, Minister, uh, Professor Melati. From your perspective, does the government help the teachers in developing their careers? So, if it is a yes, in what way are they helping the teachers?
Okay, so yes, the government helps teachers in developing themselves to maintain the quality of teaching, especially during and after the pandemic. So, MOE has been guiding teachers through the program under us. Teachers and education personnel need access to relevant quality professional development and support to be able to continue teaching in crisis context. While schools remain closed, much of this professional development and support is being delivered through distance learning by MOE in various forms, including open educational resources, which is OERS, and massive open online courses, MOOCs. Okay, so even before the pandemic, teachers are exposed to e-learning. However, the knowledge was most practical and only applied at schools that are equipped and sufficient that are equipped with sufficient facilities. The pandemic has made teachers rely on the use of internet and technology to connect with their students. Okay, teachers can attend the online courses offered to improve themselves in terms of teaching online. As mentioned by Hajah Nabilah, teachers need to know how to use the digital tools for teaching. Teachers that are lack knowledge in this area can always improve and learn it from time to time to cater to the changes in education.
Right, right, right. So, we have talked about how the Ministry of Education and teachers are hand in hand making good changes in Malaysia's education while in the midst of the pandemic. Nevertheless, that is for mainstream education. Um, how about the special needs students? I'm sure that they are not left out in our education system, right? Since there is no one left behind in this journey. However, we still would like to know the progress of special education during this pandemic throughout the changes that have been made. So please, Professor, if you could enlighten us about this.
Okay, sure. As a Minister of Education in Malaysia, I acknowledge that students with disabilities are often shortchanged by pandemic classroom conditions. Remote and hybrid learning is challenging for many learners but can be even more challenging for students with learning attention or social emotional needs. What I can advise the teachers of special needs students is to first put the relationship before academics. Okay, one of the key factors for academic success is having support system. For example, like caring adults who help them navigate the challenges they face. Teachers need to know the approaches and strategies that should be used, especially for special needs children. They need to take extra initiative in handling the students. The next one is to get creative with accommodations and support, like give more scaffolded supports and motivation.
All right. Okay, so based on what our Minister of Education stated, special needs education is also applying remote and hybrid learning, right? So, which is the same as mainstream education. Okay, this is interesting. So, Haja Nabila, is there any adjustment made to the curriculum in order to accommodate this group?
Well, for special needs education, we are providing teachers and schools some leniency and flexibility in conducting the lessons as long as they are still following the syllabus prescribed by the MOE. And fortunately, this flexibility actually gives school great leverage to be creative in determining ways to meet the distinct needs of each student. School districts can and should rise to the challenge of developing unique plans for each students with a disability to help students access their education during this unprecedented time. Many modifications and services can be effectively provided online. For example, if necessary, students with disabilities could be provided with extra time on assignments, closed captioning on video lectures for deaf pupils or students, access to print materials, visual, psychological, or speech language services for students with speaking problems, and there are much more options that schools can opt for in order to provide to these special needs pupils or students.
All right. Okay. So, on that note, we have come to the end of the forum. So I'm hoping all the things that have been shared by our panels can be used in the future. All right. So thank you, panels, for your participation.
Thank
Right.
you too.
I'd like to offer a short summary and some closing comments for this. Concerning the Ministry of Education, okay, so the MOE has been guiding teachers through the MOE's programs. So due to it, teachers are taking advantage of the online courses that that are available to help them improve their online teaching skills. So even before the pandemic, teachers had been exposed to e-learning, but it was mostly practical and limited to schools with educate facilities. So other than that, according to the Malaysian Education Minister, right, Professor Dhia, special needs students are frequently undeserved as a result of pandemic classroom conditions. Therefore, teachers must be aware of the approaches and strategies that should be used, particularly for children with special needs. In addition, they must take extra precautions when dealing with students who have learning attention or social emotional needs. Right. So, lastly, as part of the MOE Ministry of Education, for special needs education, the government is providing teachers and schools with some leniency and flexibility in conducting lessons. So this enables them to be innovative in determining how to meet the unique needs of each student. And also school districts can rise to the challenge of developing individual plans for each disabled student. Right. So as a Malaysian, we must have the sense of responsibility in making a better future for our new generation. Therefore, education is the first thing that we must fight for, no matter what situation is. So we will do all in our power to make sure that our students will get all the benefits that they can. So, and again, would like to ask for your support in this endeavor, endeavor. All right. So that's all from for today's forum. Thank you from me, and thank you, panel. Thank you for the audience.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for this opportunity. Bye
Thank you.
bye.